In 149 BC, Rome made a decision, not to occupy Carthage, to erase Carthage. For over a century, the two powers had fought 3 wars, countless battles, Hannibal crossing the Alps with elephants, Rome nearly falling. By 149 BC, Carthage was weakened, disarmed, and paying tribute. It was no longer a military threat, but Rome decided that wasn't good enough. On February 5th, 146 BC, after a brutal siege, Roman soldiers stormed the city and spent 7 days systematically destroying it, house by house, street by street. 50,000 survivors were sold into slavery. The city was burned so completely that it would be a century before anything was rebuilt on the site. This is the story of how one order, one deliberate decision, erased an entire civilization from the map. And it set a precedent that would echo through history. To understand why Rome destroyed Carthage, you need to know what Carthage was. Founded by Phoenician settlers around 814 BC, in what is now Tunisia, Carthage became one of the wealthiest and most powerful city-states in the Mediterranean. They dominated maritime trade. They controlled Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, parts of Spain, and much of North Africa. By 264 BC, Carthage was the naval superpower of the Western Mediterranean. Rome, by contrast, was a land power, dominant in Italy, but with essentially no navy. Then their interests collided in Sicily. The First Punic War lasted 23 years. The Second Punic War was worse. In 218 BC, the Carthaginian general, Hannibal, one of history's greatest military minds, crossed the Alps with 38,000 troops and 37 war elephants, invaded Italy, and terrorized the Roman countryside for 15 years. In 202 BC, at the Battle of Zama, Rome's general Scipio Africanus finally defeated Hannibal in North Africa. Carthage sued for peace. The treaty was brutal. Carthage had to give up all overseas territories, pay a massive indemnity, reduce its military to almost nothing. And, here's the key part, they couldn't wage war without Rome's permission. Enter Cato the Elder. Cato was a Roman senator, a hardliner, a man who believed Carthage was an existential threat, even in defeat. And he had a catchphrase. For years, Cato ended every single one of his speeches in the Senate with the same line.
Satorum censeo Carthaginem esse delendum.
Furthermore, I am of the opinion that Carthage must be destroyed. It didn't matter what the speech was about. Agricultural policy, and Carthage must be destroyed. Tax reform, and Carthage must be destroyed. The weather, and Carthage must be destroyed. Because despite being defeated and disarmed, Carthage was recovering economically. By the mid-2-Decad century BC, Carthage had rebuilt its economy through trade. Cato visited Carthage on a diplomatic mission around 153 BC. When he returned to Rome, he supposedly pulled fresh figs from his toga and told the Senate, "This is how close Carthage is to Rome. These figs were picked just 3 days ago." His point? Carthage is too close, too resilient, too dangerous. It must be destroyed. And, eventually, Rome listened. In 151 BC, Rome got its excuse. Carthage's neighbor, the Kingdom of Numidia, had been harassing Carthaginian territory for years. Finally, Carthage had enough. They raised an army and marched to defend their land. Remember the treaty? Carthage wasn't allowed to wage war without Rome's permission. Rome didn't care. They declared this an act of war and sent an army to North Africa in 149 BC. The Carthaginians panicked. They sent 300 hostages, sons of their leading families. They surrendered all their weapons. Then Rome made its final demand: abandon the city, relocate at least 10 miles inland, away from the sea. For Carthage, a maritime trading empire whose entire economy depended on the sea, this was a death sentence. The Carthaginians realized Rome wasn't interested in peace. They were interested in annihilation. So Carthage refused. The siege lasted nearly 3 years. The Romans, initially overconfident, suffered repeated setbacks. The Carthaginians fortified every street, converted the entire city into an arms factory, and refused to surrender. In 147 BC, Rome put a young general named Scipio Aemilianus in command. Scipio tightened the blockade. He built a massive mole to close off the harbor. He systematically cut off Carthage's supply lines. By early 146 BC, the city was starving. On February 5, 146 BC, Scipio launched the final assault. Roman soldiers breached the walls and poured into the city. For 7 days the battle raged. The Romans had to fight house by house, building by building. The streets were so full of corpses that the Romans had to stop and clear them before they could continue advancing. According to ancient accounts, Scipio Aemilianus, watching the city burn, broke down in tears. He reportedly quoted Homer, "A day will come when sacred Troy shall perish, and Priam and his people shall be slain." He knew he was witnessing the end of a civilization. And he did it anyway. 50,000 survivors were rounded up and sold into slavery. The city was systematically demolished. The Senate voted to forbid any future settlement on the site. As for the famous story about Rome salting the earth, so nothing could grow there, that's probably a myth. The real legacy wasn't strategic. It was philosophical. Rome established a new precedent: preemptive annihilation. You don't just defeat your enemies, you erase them, you remove even the possibility that they might ever threaten you again. This wasn't self-defense. This was fear. Fear that a rival, given enough time, might rise again. And so Rome chose certainty over mercy, total destruction over coexistence. One senator spent years repeating the same phrase: Carthage must be destroyed. And eventually Rome listened. One order, one decision, one city erased from the map. History isn't always shaped by accidents. Sometimes it's shaped by deliberate, calculated choices.